The dying husband sits across from his young bride, his gray face etched with pain. "I know about you and Cade," he says quietly. "I've known for weeks." She freezes, terror flooding through her. But instead of rage in his eyes, she sees something impossible. Understanding. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of red dust, and Catherine Monroe stepped down onto the sun-baked earth of Redemption Creek with her heart hammering against her ribs. She was 3 days married to a man she had never met, and her wedding night still lay ahead of her like an unopened door. The telegram had been brief. "Your husband awaits you at the Silver Star Ranch. Bring only what you can carry." The journey west had given her too much time to imagine what man would send for a mail-order bride. What life waited her in this harsh territory where the sun burned white and merciless overhead. She smoothed her traveling dress, feeling the dampness of sweat beneath her arms, the dust that clung to every fold of fabric. Her small trunk sat beside her in the dirt, containing everything she owned in this world. A widow's daughter with no prospects and no fortune, she had answered an advertisement in the Boston Gazette. "Respectable rancher seeks wife, must be of good character and willing to work." Catherine had stared at those words for 3 days before gathering the courage to her reply. Now here she stood, legally bound to a stranger. Her marriage certificate folded in her reticule alongside the last letter from her new husband. The town was smaller than she had imagined. A single dirt road lined with weathered buildings, their paint peeling in the relentless heat. Men stood in doorways watching her, their eyes sharp with curiosity. She felt exposed, like an exotic bird that had landed in the wrong territory. The stagecoach driver climbed down and set her trunk beside her with a grunt. "Someone's supposed to meet you, ma'am." Catherine nodded, though uncertainty coiled in her stomach. "My husband, Mr. James Monroe." The driver's expression shifted, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Monroe, you say?" He glanced toward the far end of town, then back at her. "Well, I wish you luck, ma'am. You're going to need it." Before she could ask what he meant, he had climbed back onto his bench and snapped the reins. The stagecoach lurched forward, leaving her alone in a cloud of settling dust. She waited. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into a furnace. Sweat trickled between her shoulder blades, soaking into the tight confines of her corset. Men continued to watch from the shadows of doorways and windows. No one approached. Catherine's throat grew dry, and she could feel the beginning of panic fluttering beneath her breastbone. Had there been some mistake? Had her husband forgotten she was arriving today? Then she heard the sound that made every head turn. Hoofbeats, heavy and measured, coming from the north end of town. Catherine turned, shading her eyes against the brutal sunlight, and her breath caught in her throat. The man riding toward her was enormous, not just tall, but built like something carved from the mountains themselves, broad-shouldered and thick-muscled, sitting astride a horse that looked too small beneath his massive frame. As he drew closer, Catherine had to tilt her head back to see his face. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, maybe more, with shoulders that seemed to span half the width of the narrow street. He dismounted with surprising grace for such a large man, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud that she felt through the earth beneath her feet. He wore dusty work clothes, a faded shirt stretched tight across his chest, and a hat that shadowed his face. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were the color of storm clouds, pale gray and penetrating. His jaw was square and shadowed with stubble, his features rough-hewn and weathered by sun and wind. Catherine Monroe. His voice was deep, resonant, rolling through her chest like distant thunder. It was not a question. Yes. Her own voice came out smaller than she intended. "And you are Cade Brennan." He reached up and removed his hat, revealing dark hair that fell nearly to his shoulders. "Your husband's foreman." The words hit her like cold water. "Foreman? But I thought, Monroe sent me to fetch you. He's at the ranch." Cade's eyes moved over her slowly, assessing, and Catherine felt heat that had nothing to do with the sun crawl up her neck. His gaze lingered on her small frame, the delicate bones of her wrists, the curve of her waist. Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Something that made her pulse quicken. "You're smaller than I expected." Catherine lifted her chin, trying to reclaim some dignity. "I assure you, Mr. Brennan, I am quite capable of being a rancher's wife." His mouth quirked. Not quite a smile. "We'll see about that." He bent to lift her trunk, hoisting it onto his shoulder as if it weighed nothing. The movement made his shirt pull tight across his back, and Catherine found herself staring at the play of muscles beneath the fabric. Park. He was built like a working man, every inch of him solid and powerful. When he turned back to her, she quickly averted her eyes, heat flooding her cheeks. "There's no wagon?" she asked, looking around for some conveyance. "Just my horse. It's only 5 miles to the ranch. You can ride with me." He secured her trunk behind his saddle, then turned to her expectantly. Catherine's stomach dropped. "Ride with you? But I can't ride." He stepped closer, and she had to crane her neck back to meet his eyes. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the weathering of years spent under the open sky. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and something else, something masculine and indefinable that made her mouth go dry. "Don't worry, Miss Catherine. I'll hold you." The way he said it, low and almost rough, made something flutter deep in her belly. Before she could protest, his large hand circled her waist. Through the layers of her dress and corset, she could feel the heat of his palms, the strength in his fingers. He lifted her as easily as he had lifted her trunk, setting her sideways on the saddle. The casual display of strength left her breathless. Then he swung up behind her, and suddenly she was surrounded by him, his massive body at her back, his arms coming around her to grip the reins, his chest pressed against her spine, solid and warm, and his thighs racket hers. "Hold on." His voice rumbled near her ear, his breath stirring the loose tendrils of hair at her temple. The horse started forward, and Catherine grabbed instinctively for something to steady herself. Her hands found his forearms, thick with muscle and dusted with dark hair. The intimacy of the position made her face burn. She had never been this close to a man, had never felt the heat of male flesh pressed against her through thin layers clothing. Every movement of the horse pushed her back against him, and she could feel every inch of his powerful frame. They rode in silence through town and out onto the open prairie. The landscape stretched endless in all directions, golden grass rippling like water under the wind. Catherine tried to focus on the view, on anything but the overwhelming presence of the man behind her, but it was impossible. She was acutely aware of every place their bodies touched, the way his arms caged her in, the rise and fall of his chest against her back with each breath. Heat radiated from him like a forge, making her skin prickle beneath her clothes. "Your husband," Kate said finally, his voice low enough that she felt it as much as heard it. "He's a good man, fair, honest, but he's not an easy man." Catherine turned her head slightly, trying to see his face. "What do you mean?" "Life out here isn't like what you're used to. It's hard work from sun up to sundown. The land doesn't care if you're tired or scared or lonely. It'll break you if you let it." His arms tightened fractionally around her, and she felt a strange flutter in her chest. "Monroe, he needs a wife who can handle that. Someone strong." "And you don't think I'm strong?" She tried to sound offended, but her voice came out breathless. "I think," he said slowly, and she felt his words rumble through his chest into her back, "that you're a delicate little thing from the city who has no idea what she's gotten herself into." His hand shifted on the reins, and his knuckles brushed against her ribs. The accidental touch sent a shock through her system. "I think by tomorrow you'll be begging to go back east." Catherine stiffened. "You don't know anything about me. I know you've never done a day of hard labor in your life. I can tell by your hands." Before she could stop him, he captured one of her wrists, his thumb brushing over the soft skin of her palm. His hand was enormous, calloused and rough, making hers look like a child's by comparison. Soft. Not a single blister or call ice. "You've never worked a garden, never scrubbed floors, never hauled her hand away, but his grip was gentle and unyielding." "I can learn. Maybe." He released her wrist, but his hand settled on her hip, ostensibly to steady her as they navigated a rougher.